game, everyone. This is Rich Ramon, and you're listening to Still Toking with. Yeah.
Greetings, my friend. This is the brain of TV's Pinky in the Brain. Yes, and my human avatar, Maurice LaMarche.
Hi, it's Chris Pullen, and you're listening to Still Toking with.
Hey, this is Eric Roland, voice of Kendo Rappa on My Hero Academia, and host of the Tough Love Podcast. You're listening to Still Toking with on the Dorkening Podcast Network.
My crew is ready to obtain the absolution, removing any doubt that we were ever fooling.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another kick-ass episode of Still Toking with. I know it's not Wednesday night. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. But we have a kick-ass show for you tonight. Our guest is just everything. Everything. Yeah, he's been in everything. So when you've been in everything and you ask to change the date because you have to be in something new, well, we changed the date for him. So, there. Anyway, the man that's bringing the flash to flashy, Mr. Jeffrey Mark.
Hey, hi, ho, ho. I'm excited because our guest tonight is like over 200 film appearances. I cannot point to too many current actors who can say that. And he's classically trained at Exeter. And there's always been this thing with American actors and people who were trained either in Canada or England. And I'm looking forward to that part of the discussion and just hearing all about his great work. Right.
And if you're not careful, he might bring death. Right.
I charge more for that, but that's okay. And that person laughing in the background is my other wonderful, handsome, brilliant co-host, Jeff. Good evening, sir.
Should I bring him in? Should I leave him?
Yeah.
Okay. Hef.
Good evening. Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. I'm looking forward to this. And it's funny because, I mean, I kind of keep up like the day before when we're doing these shows. And 2 weeks ago, I happened to put on one of my all-time favorite horror shows, movies, and only to find out that I'm going to be chatting with one of the main characters from that, who is kick-ass. So we're going to be discussing that a little bit. But let's bring him right in, Mr. Julian Richings.
Hello.
Hello.
Evening.
Hello.
I love it.
Hello.
I love the evening to ya.
All right.
Welcome.
So,
and again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule with filming down in Kentucky right now. To hang out with us for a little bit tonight and chat about your amazing career. But also,
well, I'm sorry I knocked your schedule sideways and we're a day early, but I'm sure it'll be worth it. Thanks very much for your understanding.
Oh, not a problem. You know, one of the biggest reasons, folks, why we changed it to Tuesday night is because we had to get Julian on this week for multiple reasons. One, because I've been trying to get him on for like a month and a half. And two, because he's going to be at the Vermont Sci-Fi Fantasy and Horror Expo this coming weekend in Essex Junction, Vermont, along with us.
Yep.
Butch Patrick. Max Leferrier,
my friend, yes,
right.
And I believe they just added another guest. I can't rember the gentleman's name, and I apologize.
they did. I saw that.
It was a last-minute ad, so.
Oh, cool.
But you know, if you have nothing to do this weekend, Jeff and I are driving 3.5 hours to be guests at the show. If you're within 3 hours, it's worth going to the show. But anyways, enough about that. We'll get more into that after again. Back to our amazing guest here.
Okay, so first thing I want to know is you're obviously in a hotel room. You're in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what you're working on?
Yeah, I'm working on an independent movie, a really interesting script called Asylum. And I can't give too much of it. It's one of those where you think you're in one universe and you actually end up in a different one. So I can't give too much of the plot away. But it's really good and really exciting to be here. And I always like the vibe of an independent film where it's short on resources but big on ideas and passion, and that's my kind of thing.
Okay.
Well, at least you got a hotel room. That's something.
Look at this. Yeah. And as I was saying earlier, if I get upset, you'll just see me walk. I'll make a good exit anyway.
and the room is so beautifully decorated. They
Yeah,
spared no expense.
It is, isn't it? It's a little austere, but that's okay.
You can
Nice.
focus in on the job at hand. Yes.
Wow. So you've been in a ton of stuff. You know, I mean a ton of stuff. But I do want to ask you. I mean, you've done horror, you've done like adventure kind of things and stuff like that. What type of role do you prefer to play, if you even have that?
I don't have a preference, honestly.
Okay.
What tends to happen is because I've been in a series of shows where I'm the outsider, the alien, the extracurricular guy, it's tended to keep going. And also I don't fit into the regular idea, like right from my 20s, I didn't look like your Hollywood prototype of a dad, I looked like the guy that was going to push the plot along rather than the guy that's on the heroic journey. And that's kind of been my story, really, in that I always think that I bring a primary color to a narrative, and I kind of enjoy it. The skill is not to get too typecast in one particular aspect, or just playing the creep or just playing the funny guy or whatever, but to actually bring something to each story as it's required. And so I tend to sort of keep doing that, and I tend to be in a lot of different projects for a short period of time, rather than in a few shows for a long, never-ending run.
There was an American character actor that you may remember named Charles Lane. You physically resemble him.
Okay.
And he was in hundreds of things, but exactly the way you're describing it. It was never Charles Lane in.
Yeah.
But he brought the primary color. And because he was so good at what he did, he played every kind of a thing. Right. Usually somebody who's not bringing good news. Like someone who's out to get you in some way. But he worked till he was 100 because he wasn't the stereotype.
Yeah.
And I looking up your list of films and television shows, you've made more films than Bette Davis and Joan Crawford combined.
Oh, wow.
You must have a spectacular agent.
I do, and it's the same agent that I've been with for almost 40 years. So we have a very good trust and working relationship, but we understand each other, and she understands that I like to work, and really it's my work ethic that you see on the screen. Again, I tend not to kind of go, oh, I don't want to be in one of those movies. Oh, I don't think I'll do that. I tend to go, oh, they want me to play this. Oh, sure, I'll take a risk at that. And, not everything I do is that successful. But generally, I have a kind of a competency that I can come in and I can give whatever's required. And I've been very fortunate in that I've been involved in some very successful projects, too, which have garnered their own kind of level of interest. So it comes from a kind of a working ethic that I like to be busy. I like what I do. I'm comfortable with it. And I do say no, but I tend not to be cynical. I'd rather take a leap of faith.
Was there ever something that she sent your way that you did say no to? And then, I wish I hadn't done that.
No, I've got many stories of almost coulda, shoulda, woulda, the audition where I go, oh, I wish I'd got that. And then you realize exactly what it was that you missed. And you go, oh, if only, So there's lots of hard luck stories, like all actors, and near misses, but nothing really that I've ever looked back on and gone, oh, man. There's been a couple of choices that I've had to make, between one show and another, and I've chosen one show and I've seen the other show do extremely well. But it all works itself out, and I'm happy. I've got a long-term kind of contentment, I guess.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm one of those that, don't regret a decision. Never.
Yeah.
You just move on. Accept
You
it,
move on. I mean, there's so much frustration in our business anyway, and we don't have a lot of control. So I think part of the skill is to rock and roll with it, and to ebb and flow, and to take your knocks as they come.
Right.
And that way too, I think that it creates a kind of resilience, and like I said, a work ethic where you come fresh to a set rather than kind of, oh, you want me to do that again, do you? Oh, yeah. Like it's I always look at a project as a new project, even if I'm using similar aspects of myself. Somebody's going, I really liked him in that movie, I'd like him to be that kind of guy. Then I will work hard to make that kind of a guy appropriate for the new project, rather than sort of file in a reprint of something I did 3 years prior.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was trying to find, I did find a little article that was talking about Three Fingers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I can't find, there was no answer that I could find as to why you didn't do 2, 3, 4, 5, because they had the same character.
Yeah, no, I don't know either. I think the first one was shot in Canada. It was Stan Winston's production company. I worked closely with Stan on the development of Three Finger, as did Ted and Gary. The three of us, we put a lot of time and a lot of creativity into it. I think that basically Stan wasn't on board for doing more. I think he had other projects, and I don't know what the story is. I never asked too many questions about behind the scenes producers and money. I just go in and I do stuff. But I assume that because they were all shot in Europe, that somebody did a low budget version of number 2 and then went, okay, well, we can do a number 3, and we'll get special effects guys. And the quality of the special effects, I know, sort of deteriorates with each show. But I think they ramp up the violence quite a lot, don't they? I haven't really seen them, to be honest with you. But
yes. Well, we're talking about Wrong Turn.
I was just gonna ask. For our viewers and our listeners later on, we are talking about the.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. About Three Finger and Wrong Turn. Yeah.
Right.
Which I just happened to see again, because I watch that movie probably once a year.
That's because you're always taking a wrong turn.
My favorite thing that happened with that movie was that we Gary, Ted, and myself, the three brothers, worked very closely with Stan Winston, who was the guru of special effects. And we went down to his studio in LA, where it was the first time I'd ever been and gone to a special effects studio that had a gymnasium attached to it, all these weights, because it was the way that Arnold Schwarzenegger had done Terminator. It's the only way that they could convince him to spend all those hours in prosthetics and to keep him sort of occupied and to go away and lift weights and do stuff and then come back. And I, it was an extraordinary place. But what happened was that Gary, Ted and myself arrived from Toronto to LAX, and we were walking through the airport, the three of us, and we cut quite an interesting figure.
I bet.
The three, Gary's 7'3", Ted's 6'10", and there's little me at 5'10". And so we're walking through LAX, and I spot an actor that I'd worked with probably 10, 15 years previously, Adam Beach, a lovely guy. I worked on his first film called Squanto back in like 88 or something like that. And since then he went on to Clint Eastwood movies, done a whole bunch of stuff. He's had a very successful career, moved to LA, and he bumped into me in the airport. And he comes up to me and goes, Julian, it's so good to see you. And we had to speak up. And he looks and he goes, holy shit, you've been successful. And he looks at Ted and he thought they were my bodyguards. So I kept thinking, wow, that would be really cool to walk around the place with these guys on either side of me. Anyway, so yeah, but we spent a lot of time on that, and those characters, I think probably the success of the first one compared to, or the artistic success of the first one, was because we were in sync with those creatures. They were very much extensions of ourselves. And I think later on, they began to be sort of prototypes, right? You know, well, we'll sort of do a three-finger type here and ramp it up a bit.
Yeah, they got more violent as they went.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, going back to your beginnings in show business, do you consider yourself to be British classically trained?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm British. So I born, raised in the UK, trained in the UK. Although not classically, like I didn't do the drama school thing. I went to I trained in the mid-70s, which was at a time when the whole British theatre scene was collapsing. The whole idea of weekly rep, it was shifting, changing, and people were looking to different spaces. The class system of England was being questioned. Theatre companies were trying to work in city centres, in schools, at the end of the pier, with educational, anti-racist stuff, like all kinds of social issues started to come into the theatre, as opposed to an elitist form. It was seen as a sort of a social agency. And so I kind of trained in a theatre that wasn't classically British, but more European, looked back to the heritage of physical theatre in Poland and all over the world. So I did a bunch of avant-garde fringe shows throughout the United Kingdom, and I tended to go on tour. They tended to be kind of the kind of show that a small specific audience would see, but you couldn't run it in a theater for weeks and weeks and weeks, like on the West End or in Broadway.
Right.
There weren't enough. It was too niche, right? So we toured around a lot, and one of the shows we toured Chicago, New York, and Toronto. And I loved all three cities, but particularly loved Toronto because at the time, Toronto wasn't as well formed as New York and Chicago. It had a sense of evolution. It was kind of questioning what it was, what Canadian culture was, whether it was British influence, whether it was American influence. It didn't want to be either, but it recognized that it owed a lot to each culture, but it wanted to be independent. And that was kind of where I was as an artist in my 20s. That was kind of how I felt too, is that I felt like I wasn't part of the mainstream, but I also had proud heritage too. And I wanted to be part of this evolving voice. And I found it very comfortable in Toronto. And also there was a merging of theater, film, television, radio, dance, all these different art forms were sort of coming together. And it just felt like a really creative place to be. And on top of that, I met my wife, who is from Toronto, and we've been married for 40 years. So I've been there as my base. And so it's really been, and I've seen it evolve. I've seen the theater scene, the film scene, the city itself really develop over the past 40 years. And I've enjoyed it, and I've started to branch out. I've done work on Patriot in Chicago. I've gone down to the States. I've started to, especially as my kids have got older, I've started to do more and more projects away from my neck of the woods, and I've sort of started to branch out.
Nice. Are you still doing theater?
A little bit. The problem with theater is scheduling. It's as simple as that. You know, you generally have to commit to a play that you're going to put on 9 months ahead of time to be part of a season that's upcoming. And then what happens with film and TV, you know, you go, sure, I'll do it in 9 months' time. And then, 8 months pass by, and then suddenly you get this amazing offer from somebody and you go, what am I going to do? And you can't let people down. So I've tended not to commit to theater. I've just rolled with film and TV. I've done a few very short-term developmental shows in theater, and that's it, really. But I still have a great love of it.
I remember, so you and I are the same vintage of getting into the business. And I remember going to auditions, and we would meet actors like you with a proper British accent. and we would just roll our eyes and go, "Oh shit, we've got no chance."
Yeah.
Just assuming that British actors were better trained, better prepared,
better
and
looking.
it wasn't always true,
It's
but
so
we
weird.
thought that.
My experience has been the opposite, where I've actually had to disguise my British accent. I wouldn't say that I put on another accent, but I've learned to filter it. I've learned to sort of put on a filter on top to get rid of the obvious, "Oh, cool, blimey, mate," and all that. But, the obvious things, the butter and the beers, and like to level it off a bit, which is why quite a few of my characters seem to have a sort of a classical origin or an old school thing, but they're part of the modern world. And I think if we're going to move around a bit to talk about Death as a character, I think what's very interesting about him is that he pulls from my origins, and he's got that sort of otherness from a different culture, from an older culture, but I'm not playing it British. I'm not being an old chap, British chap. But I'm bringing that classicism if I can.
Right.
Yeah.
And for the folks that don't know who Death is, Death was part of the Supernatural series, and the reason I mentioned that at the beginning is because my wife and I are very big fans of that show. And when she saw who the guest was tonight, she was like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yep." And then I go, and I get to hang out with them all weekend at the event. So
that's right. Yeah, that's the show. I guess the single show I've done that has enormous reach. You do stuff, and over a career, there's certain stuff that shines and you're very proud of. Often it doesn't get seen or noticed by people, but Supernatural, it just has blown me away about the wide fan base that there is worldwide.
Multi-generational.
And exactly,
yep.
Exactly. And and also I think the pandemic had a lot to do with it, in that it sort of went through its cycle, and then the pandemic came and it was put on Netflix, and a whole new generation watched it with their parents.
Yeah.
And so and because it's a good show, it stood the test of time. It wasn't just a current show. It was one that people liked to get into, and then parents would watch it again with their kids, and so you had a new substrata, a new culture.
Yep.
So yeah.
This is a show business cliche, but cliches come from something. Every comedy actor I've ever met wants to do that. He wants to do Death of a Salesman. He wants to play Shakespeare. He wants to do Ibsen. Yeah. Did you ever have the itch that you wanted to do some wild comedy or farce or physical thing? Did you want to do that kind of work?
I've done that work a little bit, especially in my earlier days when I did only theater. But the way I look at it is that I try and infuse those things into the shows that I do. So, for instance, if we take Death as an example in Supernatural, which is a very popular character, it's a very mainstream, successful show. But, I'm playing the Grim Reaper. I'm playing one of the Four Horsemen. And so whenever I appear, it's bad news. It's like, oh, my God, what's going to happen? But the beauty of playing a character like that is that if you can play the counterpoint, if you can invest the humanity or the warmth of somebody that has the ultimate power of killing you, it makes it very interesting. And so to answer your question, I try to sort of put all of those things, that mix, I try to play the mix. So I don't ever regret kind of, I wish I did a comedy or a tragedy or whatever. I try to all mix them all up, and I take them all as seriously as each other. So if it is a comedy, I'll play it dead straight. Or go for the visceral, whatever I'm doing, the action and the intent of what I'm doing, and hope that the context makes it funny. I mean, there are a lot of actors that do that. John Lithgow is a good example, or Kurtwood Smith. There's a ton of very, very fine comedic actors who also can scare the bejeebers out of you.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah, Christopher Walken, for instance. You know, like there are many actors that like they're my favorite kind of performers because they have an edge, and you don't quite know whether to laugh or not, or you don't know quite where they're coming from.
Oh, like Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson? Well, yeah.
Yes.
You're on the edge. You see, is he funny? Is he like, what's
Is he trying to be funny? Should I laugh at that?
Yeah.
He makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up.
But even like some of the classic American actors in early film, Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney, were all very capable comedians.
Yes.
And even though they did just what you just said, there was something in the way they said a word or a phrase or an attitude that lightened up how serious what they were saying was. And then when they got real comedies, they were hysterical because they didn't do it broadly. You explained it beautifully. In fact, that was my next question. You are, just sitting here with you, an amazing storyteller.
Oh,
not all actors are.
Right.
Not all actors are good interviewees, by the way. Without a script, it's hum. But you're very glib. You speak beautifully, but you get your story told so well. Do you write in your spare time, or
no?
Golly, you could host a chat show of your own.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say so. And it's very interesting you do say that, because I often feel that I'm a quintessential actor in that I need a script. I'm not an interesting guy. Like here, you guys are focusing on me, and I feel that I'm playing the role, and and you're giving me permission to sort of talk about my career, and I'm very comfortable with that. And I think doing a lot of Comic-Cons, like coming up in Vermont, has allowed me to meet fan bases and to articulate what it is to be an actor. I've had a bit of practice at it, and I've enjoyed that. That's been something that's only happened in the last 5 to 10 years with me, probably since Supernatural, is that I've become articulate about the acting process. But I'm not the kind of guy, like there are people that you want to listen to in a bar that hold your attention, and your focus goes straight to them. I'm not one of those guys. I can't come up with great yarns or stories. And I think that's why I'm an actor. I think that I like being part of a story. It's like I was saying earlier, that I'm quite comfortable not to be the main guy. I'm comfortable. It doesn't have to all be about me, but that little moment can be when I come in and I make you laugh, or I go away, or I scare you, and that's very much me as a human being. Is that's why I'm an actor. I'm a middle child. And I think a lot of actors are, in that state of being neither the eldest, the pioneer, not the youngest. They don't quite have a formed identity, but they can morph. They shift, and the challenge is to be true to yourself, but you're true being slightly different with different people all the time. You find a sort of a way of doing that, and being part of a collective energy, so right. Sometimes you're the comedian, sometimes you're the sage, sometimes you're the ornery old bugger, it does shift. And I think
that explains a lot.
But that goes back to also the thing about why I came to Canada, and I was drawn to Canada, is that at the time, it's changed now, things change, but at the time it felt very much like a middle child. It felt like squeezed in between, it's not American, it's not British, it's got this indigenous culture that it's very proud of, but it doesn't understand. And so, and it's only recently as I've got older, I think, that I've begun to articulate these things.
So you brought up being a middle child, and actually that was something I was going to bring up. Is you're one of 3 boys, who are all all have been involved in professional theater.
Yep.
So it wasn't just like your parents had 3 children. They were like, "Oh, you're the middle guy. We're going to put." No. All of you had that.
Yeah. And it was actually, it's very humbling to look back on it. I mean, my parents weren't affluent or they grew up, they were blue collar, like my dad was in the war and came out of the war and wanted to create a more liberal society, having seen all the stuff that he saw in World War II. And he was just part of that movement. So when he had children, he recognized that my older brother had this strange talent. He used to build stuff. He wasn't very good at school, but he used to, like, we looked at the circuit. It was in England, we had lots of circus come through town, like you have the Ringling Brothers here, right? We used to have family circuses come around. My brother was entranced by them and would build mini circuses in our backyard, and he'd build spook houses and stuff. And he just loved painting. And then he'd get me to stand in there, and we'd get kids from the neighborhood to be part of a show. And so my parents, you know, like there was no drama studied at school or anything in England in the 60s. That was considered to be weird. But my parents sent him to a youth club where they put on plays, and they said, well, maybe you should go down there and you should sort of build stuff down there in the theater. And he went, and he just fell in love with this, and he became a professional set designer. And I followed him, and I helped him build stuff. And then I went, well, you know, I don't want to do this, but I had more social skills than he did. And I became an actor. And my younger brother went to the same club and became a lighting designer. He had different skill sets. And it's humbling to say, I don't look at any of us as geniuses or, you know, men of the theater. It's just that my parents had the foresight to kind of channel that creativity when we were teenagers and say, go for it, you know, like, and I feel that's always the case with creativity, is that we are all creative in some way or another. And I was just fortunate in that I had an older brother that kind of showed the way a little bit, and my parents encouraged me. And I was born in a particular cycle of history where I think it was a reaction to the horrors of World War I and World War II, where they kind of went, you have to better the world, you have to better your life.
Mm-hmm. Wow. My older brother used to just take things apart. He never put radios, toasters, but he would never put them back together again.
Oh, yeah. See, and to this day, I can't screw up plug, because my brother had that skill, my younger brother, and it would always be, Nick, could you fix this? Could you do the tap for me? You know, and talk about stereotypes. You know, you adopt certain roles within a family, and you know, that's very much the case.
Was there a moment in your youth, obviously, to even do local theater or kids theater, there's something in you that says, oh, this will be fun. But was there a moment, or when was the moment that you went, wait a minute, I have like talent. This is what I should be doing with my life.
I just loved it right from the beginning. Because my older brother was in this youth club, I was younger than the age requirement for being a member of this youth club, and there was a need to have a little kid in one play, and they went, oh, well, your brother can come in and be the little kid, because he sort of knows about the place and he'll be comfortable. So I came in and I played the little kid, and I was surrounded by, you know, people that are probably only 2 or 3 years older than me, but they seemed huge and exotic and wonderful. And I played the kid, like the bratty kid, in a play called Queen Elizabeth Slept Here. I remember being in it, and part of it was to be this bratty kid. But there was one moment where I'm left on stage alone. And because I'm a bratty kid, I pick up the phone and I make a phone call, which is some horrible little prank played on someone that's just left the stage. I was on stage. The stage manager had forgotten to put the phone on the stage. So I'm there and I'm looking around and there's no phone, and I'm supposed to make a phone call. And I just, without thinking, sort of went out loud going, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to, and then I just said my line as if I was talking in the phone, but I sort of said to the audience exactly what I was going to do. And I sort of saved the story by doing that. And I came off stage and I was like a hero, you know. Oh my God, you're so brilliant. And I realized, oh, well, that's pretty natural. I can adapt. I can just keep the story rolling. I've got the skill that I can just keep things going. And I think that was a big moment of confidence for me. It wasn't about like being famous or being important. It was just about having the ability to keep things moving.
Which is a talent.
Improv.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I was never part of the whole improv movement. I'm too young for that. Like that came along in the 70s and 80s. But yeah, I think it was an early realization of that.
very cool. Is there ever been a script where they allowed you to improv that it actually worked out in your favor?
Not so much. Not theater, yes. Film and television tends to be a more formal medium, and unless it's an improv show. And I've never really been part of improv comedy. I've worked with a lot of comedians and enjoyed it, but they've been quite tightly structured. And again, going back to the kind of roles that I play, they tend to be formal moments, even if the rest of the script is improvised between characters. It will be the moment where there's a big event or there's a funeral or even in Supernatural, there's food and there's stuff that has to be choreographed very carefully. So I've tended to be part of that kind of scene.
Okay. So I saw you reaching over to grab a drink of water. So I'm going to let you do that while I tell our listeners and our viewers, if you want to know more about the amazing guest we have tonight, check the show notes up above or down below, depending on where you're watching or listening to us. All his information's there. But if you have nothing to do this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, Essex Junction, Vermont, for the Vermont the Vermont Sci-Fi Fantasy and Horror Expo. So yeah.
It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking.
I wish I could be there.
I love the events because it really does give me an opportunity to meet people, and that's something that's happened in like I say, in the last 10 years. I've been aware of Comic-Cons and cosplay, and the sort of democratization of entertainment, where the audience gets to dress like the actors in the story, and there's interplay, and often the response of a fan base will affect the direction of a show. So it's a really exciting evolution for me.
But now, when did you start doing them, the shows? The Comic-Cons and stuff like that. How long have you been doing that?
Only since I was in Supernatural. Well, I guess probably 10 years. Okay. And I actually remember the second episode I did when I was in Supernatural. The AD came over to me and said, "That was good. That was a good scene." He said, "You've been in 2 shows now. You'll be going to a Comic-Con soon." And I thought, what? Well, like, I had no clue what he meant, right? And I think Supernatural has been one of the pioneers in the whole notion of Comic-Cons, and especially with Jensen and Jared and Misha being so available and also so generous in their kind of their approach to public appearances. They're not closed. They tend to be very open and accommodating.
I mean, outside of Supernatural for Comic-Cons, you've been in a ton of other stuff. Like you were in X-Men Last Stand. Yep. You were in Man of Steel. I mean, these are like pop culture things.
Yeah, it was George Romero's Survival of the Dead. Quite a lot of. Also, I'm very proud to have been in The Witch, and Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid, which a lot of people, it didn't live up to people's expectation of Midsommar, and what was his first film? I can't think. It's slipped my brain at the moment, but yeah, really great directors, really great horror directors that put a different take on fear and surprise. So it's something that I've really enjoyed, and I've enjoyed the subversion of the horror genre, where it's kind of mainstream society turned on its head. It's like, we're not going to sell you all the pretty young things and the delightful commodities that we can all aspire to. We're going to show you what can happen if it all goes wrong. and I've always enjoyed being a part of that.
Right. Yeah. You know, Saw. You were in Saw. I was 4.
I was actually. I had a horrible death that never really came to light because I think at the time they thought they couldn't really do anything with it, and it was pretty violent, and it sort of got buried somewhere. So yeah. Anyway,
That happens.
yeah,
it's on the editing room floor. It's okay.
yeah, all cut up.
Yep, all cut up. Wow.
Do you find, I'm going back again to things from my experience, is there still a difference between British humor and American humor for actors? Or has that become universal at this point?
Yeah. There is a difference, I think. Now, I'm speaking as I guess more as a Canadian now than anything, because I've lived in Canada for 40 years and I've been closer to Canadian and US humor than I have British humor. But whatever you grew up with, your first formative 20, 25 years tend to sort of sit within you. Yeah, I think that there's a drollness and a deadpanness about British humor. And there's a class system. I think a lot of it is based on the fact that there are very rigid parameters for life. Or there always were. I think it's been broken down over the last while, but that also creates its own parameters of humor, I guess.
I always look at British humor as more dry.
Yeah.
It's more of a dry kind of a humor to me.
Yeah.
The Benny Hills and stuff like that.
I was just going to say, I mean, Benny Hill was awesome.
Oh, I love Benny Hill.
But I don't think Benny Hill is typical of British humor, though.
No, you're right. And I can't honestly say that I can quote recent British humor. It has evolved like everything else. Talking of dry humor, though, there's Gary Shandling, for instance.
Yes.
Really dead straight, but very, very funny and very outrageous.
Noel Coward.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Americans who will see a Noel Coward play or hear his lyrics in a brilliantly funny song, and they don't find it funny. They don't get why it's funny.
Right.
There was an appearance by Richard Burton on Here's Lucy. And, if you're working with Lucille Ball and her sitcoms, you know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And they almost screamed at each other because Mr. Burton was throwing away the lines. He was
right.
Where she wanted it punched out. She wanted it, let's hit him over the head with the joke. And it was two very different ways. And neither one of them was wrong. Each worked for themselves.
Right.
That's how I see the difference. Is Americans do what Milton Berle used to call lappy humor, put it right in their laps, where British humor is like, oh, I think I'll drop a funny over here, and maybe you'll come pick it up. How wonderful. It's that reserved, and I'm talking in cliches, obviously, but I enjoy British humor quite a bit.
To further this idea, now I think Jeff was it Jeff or Ben? Sorry, guys. One of you was saying that you were fans of Patriot, and was it you, Ben?
Yeah.
Steve Conrad, who I think is a genius, American writer, director, showrunner, created several shows. And I think it's hard to kind of contain or categorize his humor, because I think it's as droll and dry as anybody's. And it's its own form. And I think he's an example of an American who has a rich vein of humor, but it's very subversive, and it's on the surface, it's very deadpan.
Right.
So I think that also with social media, with reality TV, with a crazy sort of political climate, I think that we're questioning reality and straightness and truth and distortion. And I think all those things are evolving. And I think they're probably evolving more rapidly than the differentiation between continents, between Britain and North America. I think that we are in a position now where we're exploring boundaries of taste and humor.
Right.
Of which there are many.
Yeah, and I was bummed out when it ended after 2 seasons. So I'm just gonna say that.
Oh yeah, me too. I that was one of the shows I look back on and go, oh, I loved it, and I wish it just kept going.
So that's why I can just keep rewatching it.
Yeah.
A lot of people in our business reach a certain age and don't work as much any longer. You don't seem like you're ever going to reach any age where you won't be in demand. What is your, other than the film you're working on now, but you can't talk about, what's coming up with you? Because
well, I'll get to specifics in a minute. First of all, I think that I'm hungry. I love working, and I will continue to work. And in many ways, I'm defined as a person by my work. So it's important.
I relate to that.
It's important for me to work, period. So no matter how old I am, or I will keep going. And I have the discipline right from early on where I keep myself fit mentally and physically. I worked in a sort of a physical form of theater, so I continue to be fit and able to do stuff. So knock on wood, that will keep going. But more specifically, I've got a couple things in the pipeline. Last fall, I spent 3 months in Halifax, Nova Scotia, shooting a Stephen King novel called The Institute. And that will come out on what was it? It's MGM Plus soon. I think, I don't know. I guess it will either be summer or fall, probably fall. I don't know the way that, networks operate, but it's an 8-episode adaptation of his novel, The Institute, which I'm very excited about. I think it will be really good. It stars Ben Barnes, Mary Louise Parker, Robert Joy, really good cast. And it's also younger actors too, people that, won't be household names, but were really carefully chosen and were really good. And it's sort of Stephen King at his best for me, because it's not just jump scares and horror. It's creeping, sinister unease. And I think that's some of my favorite. Well, I think that lends itself to the cinematic medium best. The TV medium, I should say. This is actually a TV series. So I'm doing that, or it will be coming out soon. And I also did an independent film that went to Berlin recently called Honey Bunch, which is a beautiful, strange, haunting film about a couple that go to therapy, an alternative therapy in the 90s to heal the wife, who obviously is having issues, and we don't know what's happening to her, or we start to question the reason that she's there. And it's a really beautiful cast, Jason Isaacs and Kate Dickey, a lot of sort of an international cast that's really, really interesting. So I'm very fortunate. I think that I've reached a point now too where I could never play fathers. If you look at my resume, there's very few dads. I think I was a 6th grade alien. I played the alien father. And I think over the rest of my career, I've probably played like one father. But now I'm old enough to be grandfathers, and grandfathers can be weird. So I've got like a new dawn ahead of being the strange grandfather. I always think of Alan Arkin in Little Miss Sunshine.
Yes,
it's the ultimate badass grandpa, and I think, let's see what comes my way as grandpa.
You're dovetailing into what was going to be my next question. Advice for young actors out there: how have you balanced all this hard work? Because folks, show business is hard work always. And you have a wife and you have children. And how did you balance the family life with all this hard work?
I've made the space in between count, because it's not all go. It's not all glamour. There's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of disappointment. And it's important to recognize that that's the real you. It's not all about like, hey, I got a gig here. I'm in a hotel. I'm eating a meal with all these lovely people. It's about the graft and the spaces in between. It's, you know, it's always the journey. It's not the destination. You know, it's the old cliche.
Right. Yeah.
But it really is. And I'm committed to my family, and my family have always been part of my plans. They've always supported me, and I've always supported them, and that has been very healthy for me. In an insecure industry, I like to be surrounded by security. And so decisions that I've made over the years have often been, you know, for stability. Yeah, and my wife has been able to, she's been a great sparring partner for me in many ways. She's not in the industry. So therefore there's a counterpoint. You know, she's tended to have work more consistently, and I've done this kind of thing, and I've been able to be totally responsible for family duties in periods of unemployment, and then I've been away, but I've never been an absent father, you know. So I've been fortunate.
Are your kids in any way involved in the business?
No.
He says with great delight. No.
Right.
They're very creative, but no, they're not, and they've never really been attracted to performance. And I think that they know, you know, you have to be committed and you have to need to do it rather than, yeah. My daughter writes, so she's the closest in many ways, and she experiences, yeah, you know, poverty and unemployment, but she consistently writes, and she understands the ebb and flow of creativity.
Okay. So we are getting close to time. Before you guys ask another question, we've had this gentleman in the chat that's been very interactive with the show this evening, Scotty Wakefield. He said, "Me and Julian,
Scotty, he's my pal. Hi, Scotty."
Yeah, he said you and him have chatted on Instagram from time to time. He just wanted to say hi. And then he just said that he just saw our IT feeds and enjoyed your cameo a lot.
Oh, okay. It feeds. It feeds.
Oh.
Which, nice. Okay, that was.
Wait a minute.
It's
Clean glasses.
It
feeds.
It premiered last week, and I went to premiere in Toronto, and it was very successful. And I guess Scotty saw it in the States. I think it was released stateside this week. So good old Scotty. He's been over the years. I don't know Scotty well, but he's been very supportive of my work, and you know, that kind of support means a lot to me, and I really appreciate it. And there's a few folks that over the years that I kind of go, oh, I know they're going to like this one. And yeah, it's really good.
Okay. Yeah, I can see you playing like the mad professor kind of roles, and you know, at this point, yeah.
There's one role, Julian, I think you were born to play. Right. And you've got to find a way to play this before it's too late.
Okay.
You were born to play Captain Hook in the Broadway musical version of Peter Pan.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting. Okay. I know there was a period of time where I was first on Supernatural. There was a big petition drawn up by Supernatural fans for me to be the 12th Doctor. They wanted me, like, you know, I mean,
you would have been brilliant. Yeah,
and it was Peter Capaldi ended up being the Doctor.
But it was Ciro Achard who played the part originally on Broadway.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you would be just amazing in that role.
Yeah, that's fun. I guess what you're identifying is certain things that I like. Like there's a kind of there's a humor and a vulnerability and a kind of a scaredy catness about him too. It's yeah, I like all those different things. Yeah.
You get cast. I will fly to watch you.
All right. Okay. I'll let you know.
Yeah. Oh, you can fly now?
So not Jeffrey, he got cast, but it's opening in Japan.
Right.
Yeah, I got to get my passport in order first. Then I will go.
Right. So we have about 4 minutes left because Mr. Jeffrey Mark has a heart out this evening, and we want to let Mr. Richings rest so that he can be fresh for filming the next couple days. And
Yeah.
So with that being said, Jeff, any last questions for our amazing guest?
Yeah, actually. Is there any particular role that you would just do anything to play that you haven't had a chance to play yet?
No, not really.
No.
You know,
Well, that's disappointing.
I know. I've been asked that question before, and
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
I guess it's, and I can honestly say, I love the next role that I'm going to do, and I'm always surprised. And you know, if somebody asks me to do something quite surprising, I kind of go, "Oh wow, that's great!" And I'm always excited by that. And I try not to compartmentalize a type of person that I want to play. I'm just open. I kind of go with the river. And like I was saying, I do, you know, in a narrative, I tend to sort of follow it. And I mean, I always see shows and I go, oh, what, you know, isn't that great? And my kids always, they swear I'm Basil Fawlty from Fawlty Tower, you know, John Cleese from Fawlty Towers, when I get pepped up about something, you know. And there are aspects of me that I see dramatically played by people, you know, and I go, oh, well, there's a version of me, but I can't say I do. A lot of my actor friends have Shakespeare parts that they would love to play. I mean, I would play King Lear at the drop of a hat, but it would have to be the right environment, you know. There was once upon a time when I would have played one particular character, and now I'm getting older, and you know, I have a different sort of sensibility, and it keeps shifting. So no, I'm sorry, I can't give you a straight answer on that one.
Well, that's okay. I got a second question for you.
Oh no!
Did you ever play any sports?
Yes.
What'd you play?
Soccer. Growing up in the UK, cricket, and rugby, the classic British sports. Loved them all. And when I came over to North America, baseball didn't really make much sense to me. I mean, I know you guys don't understand cricket well.
Right.
It took me a while with baseball too. The idea that you don't have wickets, that there's a strike zone, and it's like, didn't make sense to me. But hockey, I really liked. And having a son who went through, like I went through him being a Canadian boy growing up playing hockey. So I sort of learned it through him. I'm never able to skate or anything like that, but I sort of culturally understand hockey and get it and like it. Yeah.
Mr. Jeffrey Marks, any last questions? I know you have a heart out, so.
I have a speaking engagement. Sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry.
But, you know, take advantage of Kentucky. If you're a drinking man, get some locally made bourbon.
Okay.
And get some locally made barbecue.
Oh, okay.
And then keep your door locked at night. And you will have a very successful visit in Kentucky.
Okay.
What the hell? So with that being said, folks, we are going to wrap it up so that Mr. Richings, like I said, could get some rest and Mr. Marks can get to his engagement. So, Julian, where do you like interacting with your fans on the social medias?
Oh, Instagram is my favorite medium. I use X a little bit, not a lot, I must admit. I used to use it a lot, and it's kind of I'm not so comfortable with it.
Right.
But I love Instagram because it allows me, it's almost my diary too. Like, I'm privileged. I can travel around a lot. I see interesting things. And when they catch my eye, I'll take a photograph and I'll post them. And it's more like a diary entry for me, rather than, hey, I'm with this famous person, and I'm in this celebrity spot here. It's more of a slightly more personal kind of a record of what I do. So that's my favorite.
So, folks, make sure you check the show notes up above or down below to find out that information. Mr. Jeffrey Mark.
Yes, sir.
You know the question.
There's no more questions except...
No, you know my question.
Yes, I have another podcast, Jeffrey Mark Plays Ella, which can be found locally on radio stations in the United States and on podcast platforms all over the world. And I am on Facebook, Jeffrey Mark. There's a Jeffrey Mark Plays Ella group on Facebook. I'm on Instagram as well, Jeffrey Mark Showbiz. And I've had a great time tonight. So I thank Julian very, very much. I thank my co-hosts very much. And as I always wish, God bless and have a happy.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Hef.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Now I have a happy.
In my job, if you have a happy, my job is done.
You know the deal. Just go to stilltoken.com, Token with the Dead on Facebook. You know, you'll find everything you need. And if you're in the area, if it's just a couple-hour drive, come see us up in Essex Junction, Vermont, for the Vermont Sci-Fi, Fantasy, and Horror Fest.
That's right. That's
right.
Yes.
Cheers, Jeff.
That is correct. So, again, folks, we want to thank Julian for taking time out of his busy schedule.
Yes, thank you. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure for me. Thanks, guys. It's been a lovely chat.
Hold on.
You know, we'll see you in a few days. I'm looking forward to that.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
To all our veterans and first responders, we want to thank you for doing what you do so people like us can do what we do. And real quick, come on. Hurry up. Say hi. Wave. My wife had to say hi to you, Julian.
Hello.
Okay.
Hi.
Bye.
With that, folks.
She magically disappears.
Wow.
Yes.
If only.
Oh, you're gonna be paying for that for several days.
Yep, probably. So yeah, like I said, folks, you know, stay safe. We'll see you next week. We're out of here.
Bye now. Bye, guys.